ये तेरा ही काम है सुन रहा है सानवी सुल्तान दे मरहबा किड़ा सोना दुनिया सुल्तान
Barakallahu feekum for us for studying always in place of Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in the Urdu and Russian language. Shall I speak with introduction to our text? A few minutes to born and raised in the United States of America. After accepting Islam, they moved to the beautiful city of Nawara, Al-Sakini, in the year 1991. Thereafter, completing 2 years study, they moved to Turkey to further develop their studies and progress their studies. After returning from Turkey, they have been traveling across Europe, UK, and the US to teach the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the beginning, the topic of reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the understanding of Imam Wali, Ahmed, Sirhindis, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, died here 1034 after Hijrah. And as we can from the name, they are Faruqi from the lineage of Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And inshallah, without further ado, we'll give him to our guest.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. So do I have to hold this? That's very interesting. Here's, you need a tech person around here to figure that one out. Stick it up my nose. Sorry. Alhamdulillah, mashallah. I think I've been here before. No, I haven't. I haven't been here. SubhanAllah. Assalamu alaikum again. Thank you for coming. Allah reward you. Inshallah, you came with a positive niyyah. And the niyyah is khalis for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then inshallah you will hopefully find benefit if, and what is being shared tonight, benefit is to be found. As was mentioned, I have before me, these are the maktubat, these are the letters that Imam Rabbani, Qudus Sirruhu, has left as his principal legacy, not only of his understandings of Sharia, Nabuwat, Wilayat, sacred law, the station of Nabuwat, the station of Wilayat, the relationship between Nabuwat and Wilayat. It's hard for me to translate those terms properly. So hopefully if something's misunderstood or it's not clear, if you don't understand, please raise your hands. That includes the women over there too. Don't be shy. I'm not one of these speakers who expects you to listen to me. If you don't understand something and I'm not clear, then you make me repeat myself, reword it, rephrase it, restructure it, until inshallah clarity has been achieved. As was mentioned, I studied in Turkey for about 10 years, and with my Shaykh, Mahmoud Effendi, and one of the things that I was very privileged to do, which I didn't know I was walking into when I moved to Turkey from Medina to follow Sheikh Mahmoud, I just got on the bus and trusted that it was going to be good for me. And yes, I'm Naqshbandi, and I stayed, that is the spiritual path that Allah has blessed me with. And in that process of being in Istanbul those years, we had lessons from the letters of Imam Rabbani. And so I had titled this as Sufficiency of God as the title, but the real gist of this title is the idea of wilayah. The idea of wilayah. And how I personally have come to a very firm conviction that the things, so one thing about Imam Rabbani, if you know about him or if you don't, but very briefly, that you have this set of letters, there are over 500 of them, They are chronically arranged, that is, he in his own lifetime made sure that the letters were arranged properly. They start from the first 20 letters dealing with his Shaykh Abdul, who only met physically 3 times in his Naqshbandi phase of his life, because he'd already been familiar with the Qadari and Chishti traditions that were part of his family. And the last letter, which is in volume 3, he wrote it and finished it just a few days before he passed away. And that last letter is actually almost a summation of everything else, where he actually is expositing the Hakikat Muhammadiyah. Which yesterday I really wanted to talk about in Luton, but the audience, I felt if I started really getting to that topic was on being and becoming, which sounds more like Heidegger than Sirhindis would word it. But I realized, it really was going to be over. Not that the people wouldn't understand it, but I would have to walk them through so many things that in the hour I was given, we would have gotten just past the ba of the Bismillah, and I didn't. I knew I had to change my format, which I did, so it became more of a, what I use the word, it was more of a, I went from being a scholar to being a, what's the term I came up with, Yusuf? Huh? What? A motivational speaker. I did a motivational speech yesterday, which went better than I imagined. So tonight, I hope this is also motivational for you. So before I begin, poetry. I have some poetry. So the first is this one stanza, and I'll translate it. If you do Arabic, you'll understand it. If you don't, I'll help you along. فَلَمْ يُرَى فِي عُيُوبِ النَّاسِ شَيْءٌ كَالنَّقْصِ كَبْرٍ عَلَى التَّمَامِ. It means there is no uyub or deficiency or unbecomingness or ugliness within a person that is seen more than, or that compares to, the deficiency found in people who have the capacity. People who have the capacity You okay? Okay. The people so I'll go back there, such as the deficiency found in people who are capable, qadireen, to be tamam, to come to wholeness and fullness and completeness and perfection. You're going to live this life, you're not a Buddhist, I mentioned the time, you're not a Buddhist, you're not cycling through again another life cycle, you've got this one shot. And this one shot, your furtherance past death, that is this death that you have to taste. Yeah. As it said, that the believers do not die, they simply transfer or move from one realm to the next. Okay? And you're transferring out, like from the womb, a 9-month stay in the womb, that was your universe, that was your world. It was very liquidy, very fluid. You breathed in amniotic fluid. That was your world. As soon as you pass through, out of that world, amniotic fluid, which was in your lungs, has to be expelled because it will now drown. You'll drown in it. And you'll have to pass from this womb to a different womb, to a different place. But what you do now is no different than if your mother was a drug addict or a smoker, and if she's really into drugs, then that you and your mother's womb for those 9 months may come out with a congenital defect. And that congenital defect means that you may have a deformity in your, for example, a hand like that. And it was, the reasons for it was something that happened in those 9 months, but it will stay with you for the next 75 years. So now what you do, you're preparing for the afterlife, the life to be. Aish akhirah, life is the life to come. You're headed for that aish, that real life. So what you do now, what you choose, is going to you're going to arrive as you decide to be now. So wilayat that Sirhindis talks about is something that you should really seriously consider what it means. Now, another poet said very quickly, and it goes back to the hammam system. This was from a Shaykh in Lebanon, where he saw In the hammam, they would use this clay that they would impregnate with rose oil. It was a very fragrant clay. They would use that clay to cleanse their bodies in the hammam. You go into the hammam, it's very hot, you put this clay on your body, you let it sit there, you rub it off, it takes off dead skin, and it leaves a nice smell of roses. So he took that what he saw, he took that which he saw, I really don't even bother by that. He took that which he saw and made it into, and put it into a poem as an instructive poem. رأيت التين في حمامي يوما بكفي حبي أثر ثم نسم فقلت له أمسك أم عبير وقد سيرتني بحبي مغرم أجاب تين إني كنت تربا وترابا صحبت ورد سيرني مكرم ألفت أكابرا وازددت علما كذا من عاشر علماء يكرم. I saw some clay one day in the hammam. It was in the palm of my beloved, and it left a mark and a pleasant smell. I asked the clay, are you musk or are you amber? For you have truly caused me to be more enamored in love with my beloved. Because it was in the beloved's hand. The clay answered to me, I am but earth, but I associate with a rose, and that made me noble. I stayed with the great ones, and I increased in knowledge, such as the one who lives amongst the ulama becomes a noble. Spirituality, I believe personally, is, in the Naqshbandi tradition, is sohbah. It is affiliation, it is association. This idea of sohbah is from the companions. They were the Sahaba, and they had their association with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They received what they got by his presence in his company. They experienced in the Sirhindian view of things what he would call Nabuwa. They lived in the realm of duality, the Ithnaniya, that we would hear among whether it be the metaphysicians or Sufis who use that word, duality. They lived in the realm where you could be focused on Allah Azza wa Jal with proper hudur, but also be engaged in whatever it is the world has before you. And there is no conflict in that. But what arose through the guidance of Allah Azza wa Jal among the Muslim people was states and experiences that would later be described, particularly starting in the 3rd century of Hijrah, where intense states would arise. And language would be engendered in order to describe these states. And the language of the word fana, for example, or baqa would be 2 terms that would be prominent in that way to try to conceptualize intense experience. Often translated as effacement or extinction, or permanence and continuity, respectively fana and baqa. So what I want to speak today is about wilayat, according to Ahmed Sirhindi, where wilayat is the idea of fana and baqa, and what that means for him, and what if one pursues that, what it theoretically is to generate. And this is what you understand. Sirhindi was very clear about himself. He mentioned in a couple letters, he said, I am not just simply a Shaykh of Tarbiyah or Irshad. He was a quote-unquote Sufi Shaykh, but he didn't see himself, that was just his role. And he really looked at what his role is, and it's not actually clearly stated exactly what he would want his role to be. But when you understand his letters, it becomes quite clear that his understanding of what his legacy wasn't necessarily to have a man who would have a dergah or a khanaqah or zawiyah and have a bunch of people around him who would, wash his feet and feed him rice and, whatever, and serve him. But it was actually to generate prophetic heirs. To generate warathin of the Rasul. Hence, in volume 2, letter 54, where he talks about prophetic, there are what he calls the 7 stages of ittiba nabi, the 7 stages, levels of following the Prophet. On the 4th one is for the alim, who he would call the alim rasikh, of profound understanding. Now he would include any alim who's just a normal faqih or a mufti or a qadi or a scholar of kalam, mutakallim, for example. If they have not gone through a process of tazkiyah and experienced fana and baqa, they would be on level 1 of ittiba nabi, of the possible 7. Number 4 was for a scholar who experienced fana and baqa, but has not yet completed his suluk, his spiritual journey. Number 7 was reserved for the scholar who is able to not only have spiritual ascension, which was called Sir ilallah, or Sir filah, that's journeying to God, or journeying in God. This is, of course, of the istilahat, the technical terminology used, but also Sir anallah, Sir journeying from God, and then what would be ultimately the preferred place, Sir fi asha, that is journeying in asha, in basically, asha here could be the same as alam, or created phenomenal reality, which you were at the beginning anyway, you've always been in, but you come out differently. And usually when I explain this to people, to help a person understand this, and you need to understand that all of this language and stuff, despite what you may have read someplace, according to your Sirhindis, this did not exist at the time of the Prophet. All of this is innovation. So anyone who says, for example, that, the companions experienced fana, well, according to Sirhindi, no, they did not. They never experienced such a state. What they experienced was nubuwwat, which is not a state of fana. It actually transcends that. It transcends it. Because their state was an absolute state of sobriety, a state of non-spiritual intoxication. But one of the hallmark signs of the path of the Wali of Allah, Sirhindi, that is a person who experiences fana, and let me define fana for you, so you guys get an idea, because I use that term, right? To help. And some of you guys that know me, you may have heard this, I'm actually not even finding my notes here, I haven't set notes here, but here I'm going, I've got notes. So can I have your water there, please? So sometimes visual props help. Thank you. What's your name?
Qasim.
Qasim, nice to meet you. May I put my finger in your water?
Of course you can.
Don't drink it afterwards. You don't know that finger's been. Husnul Dhan, though, 6 layers of volcanic filtration. But what volcano? Where would it come from? I don't know. Okay, sorry. Okay. This is you. You're living here in Petersburg. You're a Sufi wannabe. You bought your clothes for sugar online. Got an expensive 200 quid tasbih. Got your hat. You got your bag with your nail sharif on it. So you're good to go. You got your gear. You're ready. You're ready. Okay. Sorry. I'm a cynic sometimes. Not really. I don't necessarily go into the marketing of Sufism. Anyway. And this is called Volvic water, by the way. So this is the path of Volvic water, the spiritual path of Volvic water. I'm sitting here, I'm focused. Volvic, 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 Volvic. I just love, I need to focus on Volvic. I'm doing Volvic, 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 Volvic. Now this is what's happening. Now you're all here, you are all creation. You're the people around me. Volvic, 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 Volvic. All I see is Volvic, 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 Volvic. And And it's like Volvic, and this is, and I get myself really small now. I know it's like Ant-Man, you know, that new superhero Ant-Man. So he gets small, you know, and he goes in Volvic, and then he's like in Volvic. Oh, it's so cold in there now. Volvic, this is Volvic. Now I'm in Volvic. That's Fana. It's just Volvic. This is Volvic. Wow, Volvic's like that. And then he's in that state, you know, it's just Volvic. Now this is a metaphor. No one does this with Allah Azza wa Hasha, astaghfirullah. So what do you need before you jump into this? You have to have proper Sunni Aqidah, right? Before you have to understand what Volvic actually is. It's like this, and this. Okay, so no matter what I experience, I have to understand the proper definition of Volvic. Hence, whatever I experience, that is not God. And what's my guidepost to that, according to Sirhindis? That's the Sharia. Define and delineate my experience. And therefore, if I experience something and I shout out, I become Volvic. It's like, no, you haven't. How do you know? Well, because the ulama say you can't become Volvic. I feel like it. I think I'm going to write a poem about this right now. Volvic poem. No, that's just shatahat. You're in an ecstatic state right now. Just go ahead and write your poem, get it out. You see? It's like that. But this is special Volvic water. So after I've been in it for some time, and my Shaykh is here, keep him in. Yeah. How long does it take to make a char, you know? Is it a week? Is it, you know? Yeah. It's like, you know, how do you get the bitterness out of olives, you know? Anyone here made pickled olives? Like, I lived in Arizona, in Tucson. Olive trees were everywhere, like ornamentals. I picked those olives. They're really, you ever had a fresh olive pick it from an olive tree? It's like you can't eat it, man. You take an olive, you cut it a little bit, put it in brine water, and then it's in brine water. Put fresh brine water. A few weeks, and then what do you get? The olive's bitterness goes away, and the brine has done its job. The Shaykh, your murshid, hopefully, who knows what he's doing, is keeping you in there. Oh, I can see about that. He pulls you out of that state. Volvic. But this is special Volvic water. And as you pull out of that, the experience dissipates. And it dissipates. Now, that may be all you get. You had that intense experience of Volvic water, and that's it. The state of Baqa is the remainder, is the permanent state that stays after the intense experience. And then if you pull out further and further, you might actually become a Volvic instructor. Where you instruct others, it's the same thing. And that's, to Sirhindi, the best thing you can do is if you become the person who's able to teach someone how to do such a thing. Naeem, so what does this mean? There's the water. So basically, in a nutshell, this is what Sirhindi means when he talks about fana. It's this intense experience. So he'll work like this. You know, he'll say it like, you're so, in the letters he'll say things like, you're so focused that the phenomenal, like those who said in that state, for example, the intense state of, use that word, like drowning, right? Drowning in the remembrance of Allah. Until you might think or you would come to an understanding that creation itself is God, perhaps. Or you might actually have a moment where you actually think you are Allah. Intense. You would think, does this happen? Of course it happens. You know, I've got letters and emails from students. Shaykh Naeem, this is experience, this is what I experienced. At this moment, I felt like I was Allah. Oh, okay, that's good. Negate it. Negate that experience. Negate that experience. Remember your understandings. Everything you experience is, if it has association with Allah, that is not God. But the experience is important. But negate the experience. Hence, the discussion about La ilaha illallah as a dhikr, for example. The Shaykh will have the student repeat La ilaha illallah. Keep saying La ilaha illallah. Forget the experience, because that's what it's there for. But why would you want this experience? Let me hold it for a second right there, right? So I got my fingers right here. Why does Sirhindi or people like him would want you to have this experience? What do you think he would want you to have this experience for? None of you guys? Any clues? Not read Mektabat recently? Googled it? Got prepared? Asked me a hard question for tonight or something like that? Well, what is this all about? What are you trying to do? And the way to understand what you're trying to do, so I'll help you along, is like, what is the one thing this religion, if you were out in the street talking to someone, what would be the word you would say that this religion is fundamentally about? And it starts with a ta. What? No, come on. Huh? You said biryani? Biryani? No, it's not about biryani. No, it means ruju in Arabic. No, it means one, making one. Huh? Tawheed. It's about Tawheed. Fana is really about trying to have an experiential Tawheed. What does that mean? Well, to Sirhindi, when you set out on a spiritual path, you need to get yourself prepared. You need to do two things. He calls these things janahain, the two wings that you fly on. The first thing you fly on is sound aqeedah, is sound fiqh. You need aqeedah because aqeedah, according to Ahl Sunnah, is basically it's articulation of what you believe, what you should formally believe about the nature of Allah Azza wa Jal. And when you look at how Sunni scholars principally have broken down Tawheed, Arabi or Qanawi, which I've been reading a lot more recently, or Samnani and people like that, and of course Sirhindi, is Tawheed broken down to three fundamental issues of divine nature. First are divine actions, af'al. The second are divine asma and sifat, names and attributes. And the third is the that of Allah, the quintessence of Allah as essence. That which makes Allah as Allah, and not just, and for example, there's that which makes Naeem, that Allah's qiddati in English, or his quintessence. In the Sufi istilahat, they'll call it huwiyat, for example, the huwiyat of Allah. His huwa-ness, his he-ness, for example. Some translators translate as he-ness, like in He-Man, right? So the common word that, the essence of Allah. He says there are these three relationships you deal with Allah. Af'al, activity, divine action. Asma and sifat, names and attributes, and essence. From our perspective, as believers, as we try to come down into these degrees, we'll talk about divine action, asma and sifat, and essence, and we break it down conceptually for us to conceive it into this type of breakdown. But the reality is, they don't get broken down. As when it comes to the divine reality itself, Allah as He is, for example, you see this in any common aqeedah text you're going to read. For example, it'll be something like this: Allah's attributes are not the same as His essence, nor are they other than His essence. This is a very common phrase. It's very quixotic. When I did teach aqeedah, I stopped doing that because I have other things to do in my life. Let others do that. When we start talking about Allah's nature, I always preface it by saying, we're now ready to enter and go through the looking glass in Alice of Wonderland. Because we're talking about a God who, in language, we can't capture Him in language. And our ulama came up with interesting, quirky ways of saying it like this: the essence is not the same as the attributes, nor is the essence other than the attributes. They maintain Tawheed, they remain Allah's wahdaniyat and ahadiyat, while also maintaining individual sifat and asma. We don't understand what that means. That's why we always say, Subhanallah amma yasifun, Subhanallah amma yushrikun. Transcendent is Allah beyond what we describe him as, in ittisaf, description, and transcendent is Allah in what we associate with him. If you read Tahawi in his creedal epistle, which is one of the earliest in extant formalized epistles and aqidah that we have in our ummah as an official, sound document, he's very clear. You cannot attribute to Allah human qualities. That's kufr. Our conceptualizations of Allah will always be deficient. To such a point, I'll give you an example of this, that Sirhindi in his letters would say this, and I brought this up in the discussion yesterday, and I'll mention to you all, and I mentioned it in Germany on the weekend, is that Allah is so other that the application of wujud or being to Allah is deficient. The Allah in his nature transcends being itself. And for us, that makes no sense at all. How could that be? But he says, such is the nature of Allah Azza wa Jal. He transcends. And yet, in transcendence, there is qurba, nearness. There is wilaya. For Sirhindi, wilaya, the path of wilayat, if you want to call it the path of sainthood, I want to use that term, it's a deficient term, but it's a term that's thrown out there, is to experience this fana. But what it actually means is to experience tawheed. To experience tawheed. But tawheed on what level? On all levels. Tawheed of afal, divine actions. Tawheed of asma and sifat. Tawheed of Allah when it comes to his sifat salbiya, his sifat of his negative sifat, like his quality of dissimilarity to creation, or his quality of being qa'im bi nafsihi, self-subsisting. And ultimately, what he calls the that, the quintessence. This is what you want to experience. In one way he mentions this is he quotes Shah Naqshband, where Shah Naqshband, he talks about the purpose of this spiritual path is to take the things that you know discursively, that is, you know from reading the works of ulama, and that you experience them. That you experience them. You experience Tawheed this way. So, for example, let me give you an example of what I mean by this. Let's say, for example, you're doing let's say the Naqshbandi tradition, you're doing a meditation that is a meditation on af'al of Allah. And it's a meditative practice. What would be an upshot or a result of that practice if it's done successfully? You would begin to have this understanding in yourself that everything you experience around you is actually generated by divine activity. And that's actually how you see things. Everything around you is through divine activity. You may have already believed that because you read it in a creedal text, but you don't walk around that way. It doesn't really exist within you as a state of awareness, a conscious state of awareness, perceptive way of seeing things that way. But through this practice, you really begin to see things that way. You may start seeing your own actions as being divine actions. You perceive things that way. Now, obviously, creedal-wise, the Quran says God created you and he created what you do. You see, there'll be a Quranic proof text for that. We support that. See things like that. But what would be the benefit of that? So, for example, if I was experiencing something like that, what would be the benefit of that in my life? Well, one, you would begin operationalize and understanding that everything, for example, is an activity of the divine. You might see it that way. Hence, for example, you might not be depressed if you lose something. If your child died and you're in that state, it wouldn't be such a traumatic experience for you. Or if you lost your job, because you would have this deep experiential state that everything you experience is an action of God. And therefore, you don't attribute it to the guy who fired you or economic slumps or the cancer. So those may be asbab. In your frame of reference, is simply divine activity. And that would be a very good state to be in. Because it would generate within you, for example, trust with how you engage with creation. You have confidence in God when it came to the things around you, how Allah is engaging with you, with them, and you have that relationship. So some of the prophetic qualities of tawakkul, for example, will start manifesting themselves within you. So these things are tied into that. And that's just on the level of afal, and that's the first one. And then you progress on. And for him, you want to experience these things because what you want to create within yourself is someone, ultimately, who has very sound aqidah, but his creedal understandings are with the Quran and with the Sunnah, but they're deeply experiential. Which basically means this. You are now generating a person in this manner who, in the Sirhindi view of things, begins to reflect what the first Muslim community experienced. Not through a practice, but through exposure to the Prophet. That's a big distinction there. It's one thing to have been with the Prophet, have seen him, been with him. Perspective, just that exposure puts you in that state. Without, say subhanAllah, hold on a second, because I want to contextualize that subhanAllah. Technically, this is what every believer should be an inheritor of. This is the point. We're not going to be companions. You're not going to become a companion. So forget that. So one of the issues that I believe we as Muslims face years of history. Like, for example, look at me. I'm this convert guy. I'm sitting in front of you tonight, and I'm just this guy who converted to Islam. I made some choices in my life. I ended up living in Turkey for 10 years. I sat with a Sufi Shaykh. I benefited a lot from that, you know. From that. I never, in the course of my journey, said that I was not capable of all the things that were possible. We read the stories, we read of the great awliyaullah. We're talking about post of the earliest generations, this period of the Salaf, or we're talking about the period of the Khalaf, this period of the awliyaullah. We know these people. Sayyidina Abdul Jalani Qudusir, Shah Naqshband Qudusir, Abu Hassan Shali Qudusir, Ibn Ta'ala, people like that. You know, I'm like totally amazed by them. And many of us just walk around like, they're so great, and I'm just a piece of whatever. You got to get yourself out of that mindset. You cannot say that Allah is now restricted from giving anymore. No. The proverbial hands of God are not tied. The fadl exists. But there are a few who want to be the mufadalun, who want to seek fadl. That's the thing. You know, when I walked into this, you know, I didn't come from, you know, a community where tasawwuf was a part, like this masjid. You're influenced by tasawwuf, for example. It's part and part. You have stories of awliyaullah and you read these things. I didn't grow up in that stuff. I didn't grow up in that. I grew up in, you know, Midwest America, went to church, you know, did stuff like that. I think when I embraced Islam, I was a Salafi. You know, I didn't, you know, but I liked tasawwuf, I liked spirituality, but I was a Salafi, so I had issues with certain things. You know, I wasn't like, you know, like geared to be going this way. I didn't like know what I was getting into. I didn't know really who the Naqshbandi were, for example. But I allowed myself to trust, and I allowed myself to do, and continue to do. And in the past 20 odd years, the things which I'd read about, I began to really see that, you know, these are like real things. You know, this isn't just like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, or it died out in you know 1534 or something like that. No, man. And that's why I want you to understand this idea of sufficiency in God. Wilayat is something you need to pursue. Not allow yourself to think that you are, you know, you could be the worst. You could be a young man here who's just, you know, you've got a heap of sin on your ledger right now. That's okay. Or a young lady here with a heap of sin. You know yourself best. All you have to do is, you know, go back to some of the famous stories of some of the awliyaullah who were highway robbers, drunkards, who did all kinds of stuff in a traditional Islamic environment. When there were qudaa, judges, when there was a sultan in that time, and yet they became great people. And you have to believe in the hadith of the Prophet of his brothers, and people who revived Sunnah, and people who revived Sunnah to such a degree that they are worth 100 companions, like the things he quotes here. You have to believe that you are possibly an heir to that. But you don't become an heir to these type of things, unless you're willing to pursue those things. So for Sirhindi, his objective was, this way of wilayat was not to have experiences and dreams of the Prophet ﷺ and karama. He constantly dismisses these things. He calls these the Josie Mosey, the bananas and walnuts of Sufis. I lived in Turkey. People would come to our Shaykh's place. I remember one guy came up and said, well, what are you going to do? I said, why are you here? Oh, you know, I want to come here and do these practices so I can see the Prophet ﷺ in a dream. I said, really? Well, you should go someplace else, because this is not what this is about here. But that's what he thought it was about. I want to see the Prophet in a dream. Well, that's a good thing. But you think this is what Sufism is about? It's not about that. It's about following the Sharia of Muhammad ﷺ. It's about doing it without reserve, like a companion. Sami'ana wa ata'ana. So one of the purposes of fana is to create sami'ana wa ata'ana, I hear and obey, in your life, so you no longer resist. See, that's a quality of nabuwat. A quality of nabuwat is non-resistance to Allah. But it doesn't mean you're sinless, nabuwat in the sense of the first community with experience. I'm not talking about the isma of the Prophet, I'm talking about the companions. And I say this honestly, but you should contextualize it. To whom were the verses of adultery revealed to? To whom were the verses of drinking revealed to? Backbiting revealed to? Well, they were revealed to companions who backbite, who were backbiters, or who drank, or committed adultery. And they were companions. It didn't degrade their status, but it was revealed to them so they also could experience tawbah. Because they weren't anbiya. They were ashab. And yet they were the best of us. It's not their deficiency. It was their honor. So you can be as you are right now, and you can have all the, your skeleton full of guna and whatever it is there. But of course, as Jilli in San Kamil talks about, that the quality of Allah is that His mercy is always preceding and extends beyond His anger. And as long as you don't have shirk, and I'm not talking about the shirk of the idol here, just the idol, but the shirk of yourself. What you worship is yourself, which is showing off is a type of worship of self. And so obviously you want to purify yourself from that. But how will you do that until you, this is an interesting point here. For Sirhindi, and you also see this with Shaykh Waliullah. He was a very famous, right, late Mughal Wali of Allah scholar. In one of his writings, he talks about the type or spiritual subtle faculties. He talks about this idea of ananiya, I-ness. Now, Sirhindi himself didn't write about it in this way, but Sirhindi seems to have implied that in one manner, because this seems to be what Waliullah, Shaykh Waliullah is bringing out about 100 years later. Is one of the things that you, and this is what Sirhindi does talk about. You, like I, we go around saying I. And as long as and he says the nafs, the individual self, makes itself known with I. So what you want to do, and this is how I help people understand this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has an I-ness to Him. The I-ness of God. The Prophet has an I-ness of himself. Ana Muhammad, for example. I am Muhammad. This gifting of Allah of the quality of I-ness, or individuality, where we acknowledge ourselves, and we use this word I, for example, ana in Arabic, because that's a quality of Allah Azza wa Jalla Himself. Quranic. There is no God but I. There is no God but I. One must bring one's I-ness into this alignment. How one does that, an I-ness that no longer resists God. In a sense, that's the Muhammadan I-ness. You have to engage with yourself through this process, according to Sirhindi, to where your I-ness, like I am Amr, or I am Zainab, or I am Naeem, or I'm Gary, or I'm Robert, or I'm Edwards. We have some converts here. I'm a convert too, so I'm Gary. Gary, my Gary's I-ness is no longer strictly his, but he subsumes and brings his I-ness in alignment to a Muhammadan I-ness, because this Muhammadan I-ness is a perfect human I-ness. And in that human I-ness that he has, he's able to maintain his as Muhammad as the perfect servant of God, and be individual in that, and yet not be in opposition or resistance to his Lord. But he maintains his I-ness. He maintains his individuality. For Sirhindi, that is nubuwwat. What you want to do is face your I-ness so that in that process you can bring your I-ness to an alignment with the Muhammadan I-ness. And when you do that, you then become the Prophet's heir. You become clothed in akhlaq that is proper. Because, for example, some of our mashayikh have described fana as akhlaq hamadiyya, as praiseworthy character traits, which is definitive of this religion. That's Muhammadan. There's different ways you can describe this state, but it goes back to these fundamental realities. And that's where your contentment lies. And that's why it's important, I believe, that people take this stuff very seriously. This is what you should be trying to do with your life. And it doesn't come by reading books. It doesn't come by wishing for it. It comes like it's always come, rolling up your sleeves That's all it is. What is its benefit? You start creating human beings in our generation which are servants of Allah, who follow, who are obedient, who are grateful, who are selfless, who start becoming these qualities of loving other people more than themselves. So when Sayyidina Ali talks to Ibn Rajab and he's commenting to that, he says, I love this statement of Sayyidina Ali. He said, this hadith of the Prophet that you love others more than you love yourself is whether you prefer that your brother's straps of his sandal are better than the straps of your own sandal. A Muslim around you like that today. There will always banners saying Ya Ali, but you will not have that Alawite state. And raising and waving a banner doesn't make you a follower of Sayyidina Ali. You may claim all you want, but the love is in your character. And the more selfless you are, the more Muhammadan you are. It's a simple thing. For Sirhindi, this path was something you took seriously. I want to read a letter here for you, a very short letter. And he wrote it to young people. Okay? It's letter It's letter 143 إلى مولى شمس الدين في بيان اغتنام موسم الشباب وعدم صرفه إلى ما لا يعنيه من لهو ولعب. It's letter 140 to Mullah Shamsuddin. It's an exposition on seizing the season, exerting oneself to just in things la yana'i. What did the Prophet say? When the excellence of a person's Islam is leaving on things that are not his business. And he defines it min al-lahu wal-'ab, from frivolity and amusement. كان محب الفقراء مولانا شمس الدين, the one who loves the people of Tasawwuf, محب الفقراء شمس الدين, ومغتنما لموسم الشباب, let him have the tawfiq to have divine opportunity afforded to him, and mughtaneman, that he has seized in the season of youth, mumtana'an an sarfihi fi lahwi wa la'ab, that he prevents himself in the season of youth from just putting himself out there in frivolity and play. وَتَعَوِيذِهِ بِجَوْزِ وَمَوْزِ, and he just engages in walnuts and bananas. Let me give you an idea. How many of you guys have an iPhone? He's on his phone right now. Get off your phone. Get off your phone. Thank you. You love these phones. He's taking a picture right now. I'm going to stop talking in a second. Thank you. She's got her phone over there. You can't leave that, can you? You can't leave it. You turn towards that device so much. If you took the number of moments you spent facing that machine towards a quiet room with your eyes closed, doing the dhikr of Allah, you will be a saint. Why are you focused on that so much? What captivates you about it so much? What captivates you about it? What is so much? I broke mine 2 weeks ago. I took it out on my driveway and I broke it because I was in Sydney recently, and I realized I've been seeing this before. I've seen this anymore, and it broke me when I was at the train station. I looked at the train, and there were hundreds of people. No, you laugh now. You all can laugh. You think it's funny. You think it's funny. Ask yourself right now. From your phone, your Mac Pro, you are in your bedroom tonight with the doors closed, looking at things you shouldn't be looking at. Yeah. You know you are. Listening to things that are just filling you up. You know, I love the Prophet, so maybe your ringtone is a salawat or something like that. Or your Ya Muhammad popping up. So. You know, that type of schizophrenic lifestyle is not prophetic. Seriously, it's not. Those of us who are my age 50, when we grew up in the 70s and 80s, it was a totally different world. You look at those old movies and things, you laugh. How people live like that? How could they live like that? My sons are that way. I'm just saying, you give so much attention to that. Imagine if you could sit down and spend that much time just doing dhikr or salawat. But you won't. You still get up, you get, oh, Shaykh said that, mashallah. You all go off. I know you walk out this masjid, it'll be over with, and that'll be it. You're like, oh, that's an interesting thing. So he says, وإلا لا يحصل شيئا أخيرا غيرا ندامة والتعسف. If you go out as a young man and you're just doing in frivolity, lahu and la'ab, playing in amusement, playing with walnuts and bananas, you will only acquire in the end of it, yawm al-qiyamah, nidama, regret, wata'asaf, and sorrow. That's what you're going to get. I'm 51, we'll be 52 within a little over a month. I'll be 52, inshallah. Been a Muslim since I was 18. Been a lot of great days and a lot of not so good days of my life. Even as a Muslim, I've made some mistakes. As you get my age, you start realizing time is running out. Hey, young man, I was in Sydney. I got a phone call. Someone who's come to see me. They found his body in a car with a bullet in his head. He used to come visit me in my office. Very nice young man. He's still a nice young man, but he's now under a few feet of dirt in Houston.
Shall I carry on?
You don't have to. We can quit. They don't.
We would like you to.
You let me to. Okay, it's time for prayer. Come back to that idea. Prayer list. Oh, sure.
We'll carry on with each other.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله